Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email us, Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase pricing and availability questions concerning this watch. So I am fortunate that in recent weeks, I have experienced many 1980s and early 90s classical Breguet pieces from the time when Daniel Roth was still the lead watchmaker and creative force behind the Breguet name. I don't know if we bought out a collection that included all of these significant references, but it is a career highlight for me to be able to share them all in rapid succession. And this might be the greatest of them all, as it channels the Daniel Roth Breguet design language with Breguet's signature achievement, the tourbillon. So you're looking at the Breguet 3357 tourbillon. The 3350, which is the core version of this, launched in 1988, right as Daniel Roth was completing his time with Breguet and preparing to transition into his own eponymous brand. This watch is the 7 model, which is to say it's the 3350, but it's the 3357 because it features a display caseback and a fully engraved movement. So when you see a 7 at the end of the reference of Breguet's from this period, that is what that means. In rose gold, it's less common than the yellow gold model, and it's 36 millimeters in diameter, 9.1 millimeters thick, and then 43.2 millimeters from lug to lug with a spacing of 18 millimeters between the lugs. It wears beautifully. Of course, the strap is super stiff because they all start that way. That's the nature of alligator. But as this loosens up and becomes softer, this watch will wear beautifully even on very small wrists. So if your wrist is 13.5 centimeters circumference, if you're a lady looking for a super power watch that's got all of the ambiance of a connoisseur and a collector of the finest pieces, but it doesn't have the elephantitis that afflicts modern watches, this could be for you. If you're a guy who prefers classical styles and size, this is also for you. This is the power watch for him or for her. On my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, you can see I'm pulling it tight because the strap is stiff, but these lugs are nowhere near the edge of my wrist, and you can really see that in this down the barrel shot. You can also see that being flat and thin with a domed bezel, it will slide easily under a dress cuff. The strap is blue, semi-gloss, large rectangular scale alligator leather. It's got some bolstering or stuffing in it to give it volume. It's got a monotone stitch and a folded edge with a calfskin lining on the bottom, and you can see this is a Breguet factory strap with no crimping, no gouging. The buckle is period correct to the watch. You can see things were done a little bit differently at Breguet back then. This watch and buckle feature pre-August 1st, 1995 hallmarks, indicating that they were likely made before the 1995 model year altogether. And you could see how lateral, that is exterior hallmarks, were still used on components back when this watch was made. You'll also note that the buckle is fixed to the strap using screws and bars, which is a very secure, laudable, and slightly more expensive way of putting a watch together. But this watch is worth it, and you can see that we also have screws and bars fixing the strap to the case. I adore that. And speaking of lateral hallmarking, if you look carefully between the lugs, you can also see those pre-August 1st, 1995 hallmarks on the flank of the case itself rather than on the case back. That's the way they used to do it. Now, the case is handmade extensively, so this coining is achieved by cold rolling the case and then hand finishing it in a jig. There's also welded lug case construction where the lugs in the case are built separately. The lugs are then inserted into the case, welded on, and to achieve that sharp shear break between the two surfaces, hand filing is performed, so you get this lovely creased break that can't be achieved with conventional machining or stamping by itself. So this is a handmade case, and every part of this watch is handmade. The crown, in historical fashion, is not branded. That was a deliberate choice because that's how pocket watches would have been done traditionally. But they did think of everything, giving you a little bit of a recess on the underside to dig your nail in and better manipulate the crown when the time comes to pull it out. Domed bezel, domed caseback with the flanges of the bezel and the caseback defining the midcase. And then a dial made of solid gold that's been turned on traditional lathes. This is true lathe guilloche, reductive. And you can see how there's an elevated, I would call it a combination of subdial and bridge for reading your chronograph seconds. Notice that there is a tri-spoke on the 1-minute tourbillon, allowing it to act as a seconds hand. You can also see that one of the 3 hands features a little dart-style index. And then the dial is made of gold. Once it's cut and the lathe work is done to create these patterns you see here. Then it's silvered. You'll also appreciate the Breguet secret signature is present. It's written by hand, but it's written freehand, and then a pantograph inscribes it onto the gold dial base. So that's how that is transcribed in such small characters. It's a pantograph mimicry engine. The hands are steel and fired blue. For that matter, everything you see on the dial that's blue is fired blue steel. You can also see that the tourbillon structure is beautifully decorated, and there are two large pillars in teardrop profile, bearing a bridge that includes sharp beveling on its side and satination on its top. The entire tourbillon structure has been mirror finished. It features polished screw heads. It also features a combination of very sharp and fine bevels. And if you look inside the regulator structure, you can even see little interior angles where bevels meet. It is a 1-minute tourbillon. All of this beats away at 18,000 vibrations per hour. There is an overcoil hairspring, so in every physical position, the watch will keep very consistent time. That's not so much the product of the tourbillon, not on the wrist anyway. It's more of a product of the overcoil. And you can see that underneath all of that, there's banknote scrolling and rose gold gilding of the base plate, and you're going to see a lot more of it in a moment. By the way, take note that all of the anglage here is the real deal, hand finished. Okay. Appreciate the depth of the tourbillon one last time, especially those pillars that bear the edges of the cage. Really nicely done. But the case back is a showstopper. Now, this movement is based on a LeMania 387, which is interesting because it's a movement that Daniel Roth created for LeMania. And before he went off to create the Daniel Roth brand, Daniel Roth to us in America, he used many of the LeMania complicated movements that he designed for LeMania in these Breguet watches, and he would continue to use them in his Daniel Roth watches. So if you're familiar with the C187 tourbillon as a Daniel Roth piece, this is the same base caliber. And you can see on the reverse side it says Brevet du 7 Messidor en neuf, and that basically just means it's the revolutionary or republican calendar, and it translates to June 26th, 1801, which was the official day that Breguet received a patent on his tourbillon regulator, though he was working with the mechanism as far back as probably 1795. A large movement at about 30 millimeters in diameter. You can see it pivots on 21 jewels. It's adjusted in 6 positions, which is extraordinary because even chronometers typically are only adjusted in 5. Breguet calls this caliber 558. Again, it's a LeMania 387, but all of the engraving is freehand, which means all of this banknote scrolling, the floral elements, the wind and the waves, the individual characters, the letters, the numerals, all of that is done freehand. You can even see that there's beautiful beveling around the aperture that allows you to see the underside of the tourbillon. The movement is manual wind with a 50-hour power reserve, and then all this is probably, due to its age, probably not water resistant, to be perfectly honest, though 30 meters would have been the rating back when it was new. The three-dimensional aspect of the dial with the elevated bridge for the seconds and the bridge for the tourbillon means this is a cut above your standard Breguet, even from a period when production was low and the product was always fine and special. This is a great watch. And I would even say it's more Daniel Roth watch than the Daniel Roth watch you can buy today. So reach out to Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase and pricing details of this 3357 Breguet Tourbillon.